Well, some people thought tonight, some people tonight, I should say, are voicing their frustration over a decision by Congressman Tony Wied to hold telephone town halls instead of actually doing the events in person.
That decision was made after protesters disrupted Republican town halls across the country recently to express anger over the policies of the Trump administration. Chief political reporter Jason Zimmerman is live in the studio as he continues to look into the issue. Jason.
Cami, that first telephone town hall was held last night, and it was both Wied and Congressman Tom Tiffany who took questions with the help of a moderator. Today, Wied says the format will continue, even as one woman we spoke to told us how challenging it is to get a question through. While she doesn't want to be identified by name in this story for fear of retaliation, this Green Bay woman says she's one of the many who tried participating in Monday night's telephone town hall Congressman Tony Wied was a part of.
I was extremely disappointed. I felt that the entire town hall was a farce.
Of the people who did call, only a dozen or so got the chance to ask a question.
The question I have is in regards to the National Firearms Act,
leaving some to question the fairness of the process.
I asked a question. I was screened. My question was not brought up. All of the questions I could tell were Republican-based questions.
Congressman Tony Wied on Tuesday defending the telephone town hall, saying it allows for all 750,000 people in the district to hear his message.
Took quite a few questions. We're going to continue to have that format, which is moderated and again allows for people to ask questions, those that don't agree and those that do agree. And again, I think that's a great way, an effective way to get the message out.
As we first alerted you just a few weeks ago, Congressman Glenn Grothman faced a hostile crowd at his in-person town hall just outside Oshkosh. Then this past Saturday, Wied was confronted by a protester at a rally in Suamico for Supreme Court candidate Brad Schimmel. The person making the scene was removed by law enforcement.
I encourage people to bring the temperature down. That's what I will do in leading through that process. But I was thankful there was law enforcement there. It's very unfortunate. It's not okay. But, you know, I am going to continue. I am undeterred. I'm going to continue to represent the great people of District 8, even though that happened.
I asked the woman we interviewed about her question for Congressman Wied. She says it was about Elon Musk and his role with Doge. In reviewing the audio, we did touch on the subject, but with another caller. Bill and Cami, back to you.